Let's talk to Dan Hodges, commentator at the Mail on Sunday. Dan, very good morning to you.
Good morning.
Interesting comments in the Sun this morning. Britain is broken, they say, not just because people think it is, but some of the polling that they've done, and it's a surveyation poll of a couple of thousand plus people, so it's an accurate one, or it's worth certainly paying attention to. It's quite bad news for Labour and Keir Starmer, and quite good news for reform, it would seem.
Yeah, but I mean, it's not telling us anything we didn't really know. And I think we've touched on this before. I mean, you were talking about the bin strike. You were talking about issues in the NHS. I don't quite agree with you. I think there are some improvements starting to be seen, but obviously there's a massive sort of legacy of neglect still within the NHS. But more broadly, I think that's right. I think the issue is people think and have thought for a long time Britain just isn't working.
Yeah.
And in particular, just basic public services are no longer being provided. And you're absolutely right I've been saying this for a good part of a month now. We've got local elections coming up in a few weeks, got by-election coming up in a few weeks, and reform are absolutely going to clean up, because the basic perception amongst the British people is they booted out the Tories. They did so because Labour promised change, and they've seen scant evidence of that change. And that's why Labour is about to get a really big shellacking, as are the Tories, when Britain next goes to the polls.
Yeah, I mean, I've been seeing stories, as I'm sure you have, of people saying out there on the doorstep from Labour canvassing points of view, they've never seen such hostility towards the government. And I think that's the thing that's shocking, really, and should be very worrying for Keir Starmer and his government, is that the sort of the dissent from the voting levels that they got back in July, and we know that it was a relatively thin majority, although it was a very big majority. But the people who voted for them are even sort of running away in the opposite direction. I mean, when you look back at the 2024 pie chart that they've got in the Sun here, 39% Labour, 18% Reform, 12% of that has now completely shifted, so that Reform are on 30 and Labour have gone down to 27. I mean, it's almost a direct, so it's not like Reform are just nicking votes from the Tories now. They're stealing them from Labour.
No, absolutely. They're taking them from across the board, and that was always going to be the case if Labour couldn't demonstrate, as I said, that they were going to be different from the Tories and different from what we've seen over the last 14 years. Now, we all know the issues that Labour inherited, but Labour have made some massive political own goals. The biggest of which, and we've talked about it before, is its attempt to basically deal with the crisis facing the country by effectively deciding to cut further and cut faster, particularly in areas such as welfare, disability benefit, pensions, things like that.
Yeah.
And the reality is, what people see is they just don't think that's fair. And I've been saying this till I'm blue in the face, that the British people are sick of being told again and again, times are going to be hard. When times are hard, we are going to place the burden on the shoulders of those who can least afford it, as opposed to those who are best placed to afford it. And underpinning all of this are the economic decisions that Rachel Reeves and Keir Starmer have made, which are frankly proving disastrous at the moment. I mean, Rachel Reeves, having started off from a position in which I thought a policy was the correct one of attempting to protect public services, has now said in terms, forget that, I am simply going to go for growth in a way an old-fashioned Tory would go for growth. Now, that would be fine if she was able to deliver it, but she's not being able to deliver it. We had, in fairness to her, we had some improved growth figures last month. Most analysts I saw are very, very sceptical of those figures. We'll have to see if there's any revision to those figures, but the trend is clear. And also, at the top of this programme, you announced it. We've had worse than expected figures this morning in terms of wages, which Labour had hung a lot on.
Well, they had. I mean, that's what I was going to say. They keep saying, one of the things, one of the positives that they preach, and every time you see Keir Starmer doing it, you kind of cringe, because I've always said the only reason actually you're going to tell me that wages are going up faster than inflation is because of all the public sector pay rises you've given. But even that has now been dwarfed, presumably, by everything else.
Yeah, because we've been told our wages are going up, essentially the cost of living crisis is being dealt with. But as we said, the poor figures today, every analyst is saying they are predicting increases in inflation as we go through the year. Obviously, we've got this, we've got the Trump trade tariff crisis coming down the track. A lot of these issues, not a lot of them, some of these issues, in fairness, are outside Rachel Reeves and Keir Starmer's control. But the reality is, people aren't going to accept that. They're not going to accept after Labour in opposition telling the world and his wife, or the world and her husband, that things would be so much better if Labour got in, there was a fully costed plan, etc., etc., etc. They're not going to listen to excuses, and Labour is going to pay a very heavy political price next month.
And also, you can't keep telling people that things are improving when they're really not. And I think that's partly why people feel, as aggrieved as they do, because they look around and they see the sorts of people who are doing well in this country. And it's either the very super rich who are, always going to be very super rich, but also some of the people coming into this country illegally who are getting help when ordinary people are struggling and suffering. And it's like the old saying, don't pee down my back and tell me it's raining. And every time as Keir Starmer goes out there to make a speech, he says, we're putting money back into the pockets of working people. And working people are going, no, you're not. That's just not happening. I'm worse off. The council tax has gone up. My electricity bill's gone up. My water bill's gone up. I haven't got more money than I had before you were in power. And whether it's fair or not, he's getting the blame for it.
Absolutely. And but I think the key thing, again, which I simply cannot understand. We have seen, obviously, a global economic crisis. I mean, we've had obviously you and I disagree maybe on the extent of it, but we've seen the experts saying how this is, going to have an potentially unprecedented impact on the British economy, the Trump tariffs. We've also, as I said, seen Rachel Reeves telling everybody growth is going to be...
But this is what I said to you last week. She's already crashed the economy. I mean, it can't get much worse.
But, well, let's wait and see. But the key thing is, I don't understand what the government's actual response to this crisis has been. There was a little bit of tinkering in relation to when everybody had to sort of buy electric cars. I think I saw a press release saying there had been some sort of minor change to government procurement rules, which would enable them to buy British a bit more. And that seems to have been it. And just the government's approach seems to be to pretend nothing is happening, and as you said, and everything's right. And it palpably isn't right.
Yeah. And they've gone very quiet on all sorts of things that they were making an awful lot of noise about. Like, for example, what's happening in Ukraine, the coalition of the willing, because it's all kind of stalled in the White House and nothing's really changing and nothing's really moving, and Putin's just kind of gone, here's two fingers up to you, I'll just start sending missiles into buildings again. Starmer's gone very quiet because I think he's terrified of upsetting Donald Trump, and I think that puts him in an even worse position than he was before.
Well, he certainly is terrified of upsetting Donald Trump. That's, and obviously they're putting huge emphasis on trying to secure this trade deal. One of the other reasons why Keir Starmer has gone quiet on Ukraine, though, is that there was an acceptance and I think a realization in Downing Street that there was so much focus on Ukraine, so much focus on foreign policy issues, that people were obviously, we had the big announcement, all this additional money is going to be going to defence, that there was a realisation that actually a lot of people, again, the sort of people who you were talking about in that poll, the sort of people who were speaking to Labour MPs on the doorsteps, were saying, hang on a second, how come we can spend all this money on drones for Ukraine, but we can't look after our own pensioners and our own disabled people? Yeah. So that's part of the politics of that. But the reality is, Keir Starmer is boxed in. I mean, we in Britain have not been, I mean, this is his perception, it's right, we haven't been as isolated internationally since the 1950s. We got a situation where obviously we voluntarily severed our relationship with the European Union. Yeah. Trump's basically sticking two fingers up to us in the same way he is to the rest of the world. Putin's represents a real and present danger and an existential threat to Western Europe. And we've seen the last few weeks and certainly the last few days how China's acting towards the UK.
Although, of course, the Russian ambassador was talking to the BBC on Sunday morning, and he said it was absolute nonsense to say that Britain was under any kind of threat from Russia.
Yeah, well, he would say that, wouldn't he? I mean, he's not going to say, "We're coming to get you guys."
Of course he would. No, I mean, if you were a hawkish Russian, you would say, obviously, we are watching what Britain does very carefully. We're not going to make any threats now. But he wouldn't say we're not going to. It's rubbish to say there's any kind of threat, would he?
Well, no. I mean, basically, I don't think he's overtly at this stage going to go and say, oh, yeah, you've got to be really worried because actually, all that stuff my president's been talking about going back to a greater Russia and the Russia of the Tsar.
Yeah.
We're actually going to do that. I mean, the point is that the Russians are very happy at the moment. I mean, you're talking about, Starmer not wanting to not wanting to upset Trump. I mean, as we can see, Trump is now simply just bending over backwards to appease Putin. I mean, we had the situation where Ukraine, was attacked a couple of days ago. Another 30 people dead. What does Trump do? He turns around and he blames Zelensky. I mean, there's this pretense that Trump was acting as some sort of honest broker, the peace president. He was trying to get. I mean, that's all gone out the window now. I mean, it's quite clear. I was saying about this yesterday. I genuinely don't understand why now. I don't understand why Trump is so beholden to Putin, is so terrified of upsetting Putin, is so.
Well, Keir Starmer doesn't agree with you because otherwise he would be saying the same thing, wouldn't he?
No, Keir Starmer's terrified of both of them. Keir Starmer's scared of Trump.
What's the point of being Prime Minister of Britain if you can't have a view on what is supposed to be the biggest international crisis in the world right now, currently?
That's the world that Keir Starmer inherited. I mean, that's diplomacy. I mean,
he didn't inherit it, no. But surely, if he's got a right to be, a powerful member of the UN Security Council, why is he not leading from the front instead of hiding behind, somebody's skirt? Because that's what he's doing. He's so terrified. He's completely useless. You've got to admit that.
No, I mean, I think
you've got more leadership qualities than him.
Well, thank you very much, mate.
No,
the reality is, Keir Starmer. We've just talked about the economic situation. Keir Starmer desperately wants this trade deal for economic reasons. He has taken a lead in relation to standing up to Putin with this.
No, but he looks weak, though, doesn't he? Because he hasn't stood up to Putin. He talks about the coalition of the willing. He got one country, basically France, to agree to it, and nobody else. He's got no capability militarily. If he's lucky, he'll be able to put 10,000 troops into a 30,000 troop, group of people who Putin will completely swamp with his 700,000 troops. There's no point to it.
Look, you say he's been weak. I mean, my view is he's trying to be pragmatic. Where I would agree with you, though, I do think he is now starting to run out of road. He's attempted to position himself as this bridge between Europe and the United States.
And that hasn't
worked.
worked.
Build himself as this bridge between Zelensky and Trump. The reality is Trump isn't interested in the bridge. No. He doesn't care. He doesn't care about Europe. He doesn't really care about us. There's some more stuff today about some nice warm words from J.D. Vance about the importance of the relationship and culturally.
Yeah, it's all cobblers, isn't it?
Trump wants tea. Trump definitely wants tea with the king. He wants to put that in his scrapbook. But that aside, and we've seen this with the fact that we had the same tariffs imposed on us as the Penguins did. This is the idea of a special relationship is gone. It's dead. It's for the birds. Now, Keir Starmer's been trying to navigate that. I think, as I said, his capacity to do that is basically coming to the end now.
Yeah, I don't know what he's for. And I think what happens after May the 1st is going to be very interesting. We'll talk about it again, I'm sure. Dan, good to speak to you. Dan Hodges, commentator at the Mail on Sunday.